5.3 Indirect Proofs. First definition we're going to talk about is indirect reasoning, which is to assume the opposite to prove the original statement. Other common terms used instead of indirect reasoning include indirect proof or proof by contradiction. So there's 3 steps for writing proofs. You probably already have this written on your theorem builder, and I have it written down for your notes, and they are the following steps. 1. Assume that the conclusion is false. So whatever you're trying to prove, just say it's wrong, and we're going to say the opposite. Number 2. Show that this assumption leads to a contradiction. Well, obviously, if your original statement was true, then it will be very easy to find a definition, a postulate, a theorem, or a corollary to prove yourself wrong. Last one is point out that because the false conclusion leads to an incorrect statement, the original statement must be true. Alright. So what I'd like you guys to do right now is turn the page, look at example number 1. They tell you to state the assumption you would make to start an indirect proof for each of the statements. So pause this video, look at all of those statements, and state what the opposite would be. Alright, you're back. So I want to go over those answers with you guys. Okay, so I have them written down here. So with part 1, it says segment EF is not a perpendicular bisector. So to state the opposite, segment EF is a perpendicular bisector. Part B. Instead of saying they're equal to each other, that 3x equals 4y plus 1, we're going to say it does not equal. So you do the equal sign with a line through it. Part C. Measure of an angle. Angle 1 is less than or equal to the measure of angle 2. This one always gets everybody because we're not sure about what symbol to use. If it's less than or equal to, you're going to just do greater than. Right? So then the circle, I have greater than symbol. Last part, it says if B is the midpoint of segment LH, LH is equal to 26, then segment BH is congruent to segment LB. So in this case, the only thing we have to change is the if part. My hypothesis saying if B is a midpoint of segment LH. So we're going to say B is not a midpoint. So this is your first step. You're always going to assume the opposite. Whatever you want to prove, you state the opposite. You then go through and show that your statement's false. Okay. And then you, at the end, will say, well, this is false because of blah, blah, blah. So why don't you take a moment, take a look at example number 2. I'm going to give you guys an algebra problem, and I want you guys to do my 3 steps. Right? So see what you guys can kind of think about, and then in a second we'll go over example 2. So you can pause now. Alright, we're back. So, example number 2. Alright, so of course first I'm going to assume that y equals -2, because whatever I'm trying to prove, I'm going to state the opposite. Part number 2, I'm substituting -2 in for y. So I'm going to actually literally just plug it in and solve and see what happens. So here you've got 1 over 2 times -2 plus 4 equals 20. That simplifies to 1 over -4 plus 4 equals 20. Then I get 1 divided by 0, and that equals 20. But that doesn't equal 20, because we cannot have a denominator that's 0. So in part 3, I'm saying the denominator cannot be 0. Okay, it's undefined. And then, so y does not equal -2. So that is the 3 steps to an indirect proof. Much easier than some of the other proofs that we've looked at so far. So, take a moment, pause, look at the next example, and when you guys come back, then we will look at this next example together. Alright, so when you guys are back, I'm just going to put up this example for you guys. Alright, so let's go through this. Alright, let's just read through what they gave us. Marta signed up for 3 classes at a community college for a little under $156, so she paid less. There was an administration fee of $15, but class costs varied. How can you show that at least one class costs less than $47? So this is just kind of some of my scratch work over here. I know that if I take $15 away from the $156 that she supposedly paid under than that, I know that this X amount is less than $141. So that means that if we just state this here, that 3x plus 15 is less than 156, and solve, so I took away 15 from 156, got 141, divided by 3, and got 47. So this is the statement that I need to prove. So I'm going to assume the opposite. So instead of less than 47, it's going to be greater than or equal to 47. Okay. Part 2. I'm going to say, well, if I plug in, let's say 3 in for x, okay, or, well, I'm actually plugging in 47 for x, so you're tripling your 47, adding 56. That means that the left-hand side and the right-hand side are equal to each other. So part 3, because part 2 proved that it was equal to 156, and it's supposed to be under 156, I can say this contradicts the statement that the total is less than 156. Therefore, one class must cost less than $47. So that's just, again, applying your indirect proof to a algebra problem. We've got one last example to go through in this section, and that is example 4. So if you guys could flip to example 4, pause this video, again, take a look at it, and then when you guys come back, we'll go over the answer. Alright, we should be back now. So, I'm just going to put up my slide. They gave us a triangle this time. They said triangle JKL side lengths 5, 7, and 8 are as shown. Prove that the measure of angle K is less than the measure of angle L. So that means that we're trying to prove that this angle is less than, or angle K is less than angle L. So we're going to assume the opposite. We're going to say, well, angle L is actually less than angle K. We know that can't be true because of what we talked about in the previous lesson. Because the opposite side is always opposite the biggest angle. So largest side, biggest angle. So when we state the opposite, we're going to say measure of angle K is greater than or equal to measure of angle L. Comparing the angle side relationship, okay, JK is greater than or equal to JK. That means that a statement must not be true. Therefore, let's fix this. Therefore, our statement that we said is false, okay, and that the measure of angle K is less than the measure of angle L, which is what we tried to prove to begin with. And that concludes 5.3.